Welcome, everybody. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Michael Trimboli. And before we have Michael come up and share a bit about their work, just a quick bio. Michael is a printmaker from West Virginia. He graduated from Ohio University with his BFA in studio art in 2024 and is now a printmaking resident at the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts. Michael's work explores the concept of how we define home and the liminal spaces we find ourselves in during times of transition. It is my pleasure to welcome to the podium Michael Trimboli.
Good morning. My name is Michael Trimboli. I am a printmaker and visual artist, and I'm so excited to be here and tell you a little bit about my process and my work. So, first off, good morning. Fun fact about me, I have never thought I am unqualified or this is out of my skill set when starting a new project. I say that to introduce myself to you as an artist in the fact that the way that I approach my work is always through curiosity and the need to understand something in a very tactile way. So the thoughts of I am unqualified to do this come about midway through the project when I'm already committed. But what I'm going to be covering today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I'm from and how I got started in art, my education and how my artistic identity has grown, how I got here and what I'm doing and my work that I'm really proud of here. And then what comes next. So, like Leslie said, I grew up in West Virginia. I am from Huntington, which is a small city right on the border of West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. I am very proud of where I'm from. I love the region. West Virginia and the Appalachian region as a whole really inspire my work and really define me a lot as a person. Growing up, art was something that it was a hobby. It was an outlet for me outside of school. I was an athlete. I spent a lot of time traveling for sports. I spent a lot of time working on my academics. Art was just something that was there on the sidelines when I needed something else. That is until I went to high school. I transferred my freshman year into a small Catholic school. That is a horror story for a lot of people, but for me personally, I loved it. I got the chance to work very closely with my teachers. I got the chance to know my community much better. And once I got to high school, I got more interested in art. It became not just a hobby, but a serious outlet as I tried to grow into the person that I was becoming and become, not so much just a child anymore. I had a lovely instructor. Miss H taught one art class. It was a very small school, so we had Art 1, and that was about it. But she really took the time to work with me in a much more meaningful way. I retook her class as many times as I could. She made sure that I had extra support, that I was being given different assignments, that I was being taught in a way that would grow my portfolio and teach me that you can be an artist and you have something here. She took a serious interest in my passion. Going into my senior year, I was going to go to college for education. That had been my plan for as long as I can remember. And this is probably not the quote that she would have loved for me to take with me throughout all of my life, but this is one thing that I always come back to, is she looked at me one day during lunch and said, "You do not want to go into education. You're just afraid to take your work seriously." And I didn't listen. I graduated in 2020, which was a super interesting time to graduate from anything. And I moved to Frederick, Maryland that fall to pursue a degree in education. So I moved. It was my first time away from home. It was me really coming into myself, discovering my identity as a queer man, really everything was up in the air. But the one thing that I was still clinging to was, I know what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to go into education. Miss H inspired me a lot, and I was like, well, maybe I could teach art. She hated when I said that. She said, that will kill you. Please don't do that. But the one thing that she did tell me before I left was, you have to keep taking art classes. If you're going to go into education, fine. Please don't take this outlet away from yourself. Don't give up on this thing that you've grown so much in the past 4 years. And as soon as you can, please take a printmaking class. And I said, I don't know what that is. And she said, I promise you'll love it. So I got to Hood and I took a printmaking class that spring. And this was my first print. And I absolutely fell in love with printmaking. There was nothing else that I had ever done that I felt so connected with. The process and the time it takes to actually make a print and this repetition that comes with printmaking just lit a fire in me that I really didn't know existed yet, that clearly Miss H saw. So after this class, I realized, okay, she was right. I do not want to go into education. I would love to do something with this. Maybe I should take this more serious. Now, I loved Frederick, Maryland. I loved Hood College. It did not have a more serious studio art program, and it really wasn't going to give me the education that I was looking for at that point. So I transferred. I moved closer to home, which was nice, and I moved to Athens, Ohio, and Ohio University. I loved Athens. It really became a new home for me in a way that I don't think Frederick ever would have. And I switched my major to studio art, and I changed my concentration to printmaking. And I got to work. I got the chance to explore so many different forms of printmaking, of just different art making, and so many new ideas that I had never been exposed to before. While here, I got the chance to really explore what I wanted to make work about now that I'm being given all of this time and these resources to make work, and in a very new and specific way. I was like, okay, what do I keep being drawn to? What do I keep wanting to make work about? And a lot of times it was my identity. I was making work about who I was in this transition from a child and from being at home to moving to being in this constant state of transition in a lot of different ways. And that really fueled all of my art making until I got the chance to, outside of art, start taking classes in Appalachian Studies. And that made my connection to home even more strong. So for my thesis work, my final work at my university, I started to explore my connection to home, my connection to specifically the Appalachian region. This body of work, called The Road Home, was about the nuance of growing up in a much more conservative place, a very small place, somewhere where I wasn't exposed to a ton of ideas, but I loved it and I found so much comfort there. So I wanted to acknowledge that and give thanks to this place that I loved so deeply and knew that I had to leave, while also acknowledging there were issues there. And then about this time last year, I was realizing, okay, you're going to graduate in May. What are you doing after this? What comes next? Thankfully, at OU, I got to work very closely with my instructors and my mentors, including several grad students, one of whom, Tyler, was a former resident here at the KIA, and he really encouraged me to apply. He said, I really think that this would be a great place for you. I think it will get you out of your comfort zone. I think it will throw you into the deep end of get out there and just make work. And he was correct. I really cannot thank the people who I've worked here with enough for everything that I've learned, for the opportunities that I've had. Like Matt said before, I got the chance to work with a community here that I had never been a part of. It was a great way for me to really get to know this place that I moved to. I had never been to Michigan before. I up and moved, and I got the chance to really learn about this place that I was diving headfirst into. And I really want to thank Leslie and Deb for everything that I've gotten to do here. So I got here, and I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do yet. I knew that I had been making work about identity that I had taken a break from to pursue my BFA thesis work, and I was considering going back to that. So my first project here was our steamroller event, and that large print to the far side of the screen was my steamroller block here, really exploring this idea of like finding who I am and really having the confidence to show people this very intimate side of me and, you know, what makes my heart sing. And then it became, I was like, oh, I have this opportunity to explore work in a way that I haven't before, to really, I don't have specific assignments. I don't have this super strict, like, oh, timeline of what I need to get done. One thing that I knew that I wanted to do was push myself out of my comfort zone. So I started working with color more. I started layering. I started working with different types of alternative photography. But one thing that I knew that I definitely wanted to explore while here was dry point printing, which is something that I had seen done and I had never gotten to do myself in my undergrad. So dry point printing is a form of intaglio printing, which is a technique in which the image is incised into a surface and the incised line or sunken area holds the ink. This was my first dry point print. And this basically just means I'm taking a very smooth surface, in my case, I'm using plexiglass, and scraping in a very thin sketch-like line into it that then can hold ink and be used to print. So now I'm gonna go through my process with that because it really has informed the way that I'm making work here. I spent a lot of time just trying things out. I was determined to teach myself this new skill and figure out how to really make it my own. So first I have my little etched plate. This is all done with just a single small needle tool. And then I get to set up my inking setup. To print a dry point print, I need a nice like soft ink, a very soft like satin cloth as to not create any new scratches on the plate, and gloves to keep my hands clean, or else I'll cover everything in my life with ink. It does happen anyways, regardless of the gloves. So I get to ink up my plate, which is just covering the entire thing in a nice thin layer of ink. And from there, the fun starts. From the time of putting ink on the plate to the time of pulling a print, it takes me about an hour and a half, depending on the size of the plate. But I start with a first wipe, which I use the satin cloth for. I take off a good amount of the ink, leaving a very thin layer of it on the plate so I can see my lines. I can see the image coming through, but I don't want to remove all of the ink yet. In traditional printing, you would remove everything but the lines that you have created. I really enjoy the time that I get to spend with my plate and selective wiping and playing with the values of the ink that I do get to leave on the plate. This process really gives me a lot of time to think about my work, and I feel like the beginning of my process is very intuitive. I'm not thinking a lot about the work that I'm making whenever I first start. That tends to come after, once it's done, and I get to spend this time with it and go, okay, why did I do that? So spending an hour and a half with this kind of work gives me a lot of time to work on concepts, which is super helpful. In order to print things like this, the paper needs to be damp. So I soak my paper for 20 to 30 minutes. I then dry it just enough so it's good and soft. It's not dripping water everywhere though. The dampened paper is then laid over my plate, which has been moved to the press. and then it is sent through the press at a very tight pressure. After this, I get my first print, and the first print always tells me a lot about what I need to change in the wiping process the next time, and what I need to do moving forward. This process and spending a lot of time alone and focused on my own work gave me a lot of time to figure out what I wanted to do with my body of work here. Originally, I thought that it would be about identity, and in these moments alone in the studio, nothing felt right. Nothing was speaking to me. I didn't know where I wanted to go with this work. And the more time I spent, the more I was like, I just miss home. I miss home. Moving was hard. I went from a very active community in my college town and where I grew up to throwing myself in up here. And while the community is great, I found it very difficult, and I really struggled to reconcile with this idea that I was still very connected to home. And it was making it hard to make work until I let myself make work about it. So that brings me to how I wanted to approach my body of work here. My current body of work explores the growing pains beyond the comfort of home and the liminal in between when finding a new sense of home. The first print that I made here that let me explore this was Outgrown. This piece I spent a lot of time with. It taught me a lot about the techniques that I was doing and what I wanted to do with them. And it made me realize a lot about myself and where I was at. I do still regularly feel like this person trapped in this weird sense of home. I knew that I had to leave where I was in order to grow as a person, but I would love to be able to squeeze myself back into that box and just be comfortable there. So I started making work about it, and I started pushing myself to acknowledge those feelings and be okay with that, and be okay with the fact that it's maybe that's okay. Maybe it's supposed to be painful growing up. Maybe you're not supposed to have everything figured out at 23. So the rest of that body of work will be on display at our show, which opens May 2nd. I really encourage anybody who can to come see it. I'm very proud of my body of work that I'm working on here, and I'm so incredibly proud of the other residents here. They make amazing work, and I really think that this show will say a lot. So, what after that? Once I'm done here, I do plan on moving again. I plan on moving to the Tennessee area. Eastern Tennessee, I plan on applying to grad school. Moving back to the Appalachian region was really important for me because it informs a lot of my work, and I do want to continue that at a graduate studies level as well. I would like to get my MFA while also being able to pursue another degree in Appalachian studies. So after that, I don't know, my end goal has always been education somehow, so I do keep coming back to that. But now I realize that the passion that I have for this is what I want to teach and be able to share at a college level, the way that a lot of people who have pushed me and inspired me got to do. So, questions?